ask Mr. Mushfiqul Fazal to say a few words. Mr. Fazal is a UN correspondent for Just News in New York. Please, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you are going to do a presentation. All right.
So thank you very much for this wonderful seminar, and the title is Simplification of Targeting Media and Journalists on Human Rights and Democracy. And I'd like to thank Bangladesh Progressive Alliance of North America and Harvard International Relations Council, as we are facing very critical time, as reporter I have to say. And I'll go for though it's already covered by the Mr. Tanveer Nawaz, but I'll skip whatever he has covered. And the rest of the thing, I'm waiting for my slide. My name is Mushfiqul Fazal. I'm waiting for this, and I'm taking this time, and I'm working as United Nations correspondent, as partly White House correspondent for Just News BD. And I also face critical time from my ruling authority. I'll go into in Bangladesh, especially the very recent act which is passed by the ruling government to control the media in Bangladesh. As I am from Bangladesh, and I'll focus on that. And as mentioned, this is a very a horrific incident we have seen about Mr. Khashoggi. If technical difficulties is solved, I will try to show his voice, because I don't want to go in his detail. Already you got the picture about his career and who he is and what was his background. But only one thing he said: I don't want to change the government. I don't want to change the ruling authority. I just want only one thing that I want to write and I want to say. Just simply one thing he wished to. It was his wish. That freely he can express his views. Freely he can express what he believes. That is his only fault, and he got the. He is targeted by the way, this incident. I did not find any example from the history. This is a safe entity, we know, the sovereign entity, even country within the country, we can say, in the consulate, and the way he disappeared and they killed by the ruling authority. I cannot describe in words what horrific it is. And already he mentioned the book. Can I get my slide? Okay.
Yeah,
okay, go ahead, and I'm trying to continue. And as mentioned that the two fellow journalists from the Reuters, those who are working in Myanmar, and they are doing their job, investigating, reporting. Nothing is hidden, everything is visible. And this is a global village. If I want to hide something, it cannot be. It will be discovered one day. But just they report, and they try to, especially their investigating reporting was the 10, the Rakhine people that died. They killed by the law enforcement agency, and they try to discover what happened and the Rakhine state, and that's why the police invited them in a lunch, and then after this lunch they finished, they are going out, and the law enforcement agency picked up, and they got the 14 years punishment from the ruling authority. At least they disclose. I'm happy that still they are not disappeared or they are not killed. At least they are alive. So even then, where we are talking right now in the United States of America, I got that opportunity to cover the president, even the outside, the Berlin and the London. In London, when I went to the White House press corps to cover him, and because I had to focus on to what's going on and how they received a president like United States of America. And you know, the balloon and all these things, what happened. And I reported accordingly, beside the president's schedule, I report, you know, obviously things is happening. And I should say, even that all these circumstances is happening, all these incidents is happening, and as I can mention about the Jim Acosta, one of our fellow colleagues, how he treated in the recently in the president's press conference, you know, and this is not the this is very uncomfortable, not for the American journalists, for the world as well, because as we know, America is a patron of the freedom of press, rule of law, and the freedom of expression and the human rights. So from an outside journalist, it's shameful for us as well, that those who are patronizing our democratic values, institutions, but these incidents is happening in the highest office of the country. So this thing is happening, but I want to try to relate that from my personal experience, I report accordingly what happened in London. If I report from Bangladesh, one of the fellow journalists from Bangladesh is here, especially Nazmul Bhai, he will agree with me that, and the Rob Bhai is here, I think. Yeah. If I report, you know, I'm covering with Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina for example, I'm covering in New York. But if I try to, you know, report anything, at least I will be in jail. I cannot be, you know, accompany Prime Minister Hasina in her aircraft or the other aircraft to go to Bangladesh, because our journalism. So I still all these things are happening, but I have to say this is the beauty of America, that we can say whatever we feel, though there is obstruction going on. The freedom of press is control. We're trying to, you know, but not that much control. The society is accepting that, and the establishment is accepting that. I mean, our country, where I am from, the whatever the chief executive say, this is the law. Chief executive means prime minister of the country. So there is nothing in between. You know, the simple thing is you have to be. You are free to talk, but you have to talk on my behalf. This is the freedom of Bangladesh. Nothing is in between. You have to be my man. Otherwise, you will be acting like anything. So this thing is, you know, happening in our country. And the very draconian law, I have to say, in Digital Act, which introduced by the unelected parliament, that to controlling the media and the press. Now, media transparency depends on police and law enforcement agency. They will decide what is the report, what the basis of the report, if it is true or not. If the thing, and against the prime minister, there is a clause. You know, I'm waiting for I wish I will get my slide. So still I'm waiting for that. But there is
perhaps it's facing repression of media.
So you cannot say anything against. If you say anything like they say embarrassment of the government, I cannot embarrass any of my writing. Otherwise, I'll be prosecuted. There is, I think, even the lifelong sentence is there in the law, 14 years, 10 years, and I think 50,000 Bangladeshi currency in terms of dollar you can exchange. So you know, so this is the law. But before the law, what happened in Bangladesh? We are talking about the draconian law, the Digital Act. But whenever this government is in power without a, so-called selection in the name of election, they are trying to controlling the media. And media is, for their survival, they are trying to adjust with the government. Some journalists, they are very bright. I'll mention in my slide if I go. So they are trying, and those who are bright, their address will be in the prison. So many of journalists, I can mention 82 years journalist, Shafiq Rahman, he was in jail. And last and the very serious episode was the Shahidul Alam. You already mentioned that. What he said, he just appeared in Al Jazeera. He said about what incident is going on, why people are demanding, particularly students, they are demanding for the road safety. And he appeared in the Al Jazeera. He said, and he told that what he believes, what's going on, and how they they are going for the protest. So, and that's why they picked up, and 24 hours he was, more than 48 hours he was disappeared. Nobody claimed that he is picked up by the law enforcement agency. But then they declared, he said in an interview that he is beaten up and they are physically tortured, and his cloth was, and then they cleaned the cloths with they removed the blood, and then he wear again this cloth, and they say, I cannot justice in this country. So this Bangladesh is, I am comparing to the developed world. Still there is, as I mentioned, and the Bangladesh developing world. But why we are telling this in this country? But very distinguished panelists are there. I can say the Alia Iftikhar is a good patron of free journalism, working for the Committee to Protect Journalists, and a very good friend and trusted friend of Bangladesh, who served enemy and the friend, means Pakistan and Bangladesh, as ambassador. So he had sorry? Okay. So it's bad luck for me. What I have tried to project, very brief way. So I'm not getting any support, technical support, and technical difficulties I have got. So even then, those who we are participating here, we know everything what's going on in Bangladesh and what's going on in United States of America. But only one thing, we have to raise our voice. If we say, okay, what's going on? Okay, I'm not going Bangladesh. Okay, I have some property and I just sold out and I bought a beautiful house and my children are going there. So, because we are from that country and we are living in America, you are living in America, and you have got tremendous support from your country people, from your parents, from your roots. So we cannot forget about the obligation. So we have to raise our voice. We have to, someone has to raise the voice. And this very recently, the Bangladesh is the next election will be held. I hope the one of the speakers will address this issue. How the government of United States of America and civil society, they are observing the situation. The election commission declared another schedule for the election. But there is a no level playing field. Everything is under control by the ruling authority. You don't have any speech. You do not have a freedom of association. But
we are seeing so much disassociation or disbelief from the general public, why we tend to get sort of pressed into thinking that there is fake news, and what is a plethora of sources of information that we have especially in the digital media, who to believe or not. So there are a lot of very interesting
I want to start out by talking about the present administration here. Because when you hear about the treatment of the press by the present administration, you always hear this sort of, well, you know, no president has ever liked the press. Well, yes, but no president has ever treated them like this president is. And I think this is, sort of gets me into what I wanted to say, which is that I came with a few facts about, you know, the press, suppression of the press and the media in general in Bangladesh, which I'll skip because I think that's been handled very well. But I did want to say that it is what is happening now is really, in a worldwide sense, almost worldwide, movements towards authoritarianism. Now, some of it's populist. I don't think that Sheikh Hasina qualifies as a populist, for example, but she certainly started the move towards authoritarianism almost 10 years ago. And authoritarianism, and I mentioned Sheikh Hasina, but I don't want to seem like it's a partisan thing, because in Bangladesh, I think authoritarianism has been a bipartisan thing. And I could give you chapter and verse of how both governments, or both parties I should say, when they ran the government, have made things worse and worse, deteriorated the institutions that should have kept, pushed authoritarianism away, instead brought it closer. So, and this is, you know, I worry about this happening here too, because we see signs of it. But so far our institutions have held up. But it gets me to my more basic point about Bangladesh. I'm really going to end this, by the way, with what I think is hopefully good news. But, and that will be a way to end, I think. But let me go back and say the problem in Bangladesh, and I think most of the other countries that we're talking about, the problem is that politics, in the way we should think of politics, has failed. Now, let me just take Bangladesh, because I know that very well, although I also think that politics, which never really existed in Pakistan, has failed too. But politics are really, I think, when you go back into human history, way, way back, was a way that humans actually regulated their activities, that they found ways to keep violence down. If you think about it, political parties and politics were a way that they divided up what we call economic rents, the things that come from being a part of government. And what is happening, what's happened in Bangladesh at least, and I suspect a lot of other countries, is that politics is failing because it has become very, very much more a zero-sum game. What you get, I don't get. And this is where I think the whole world really is going in the wrong direction, and a very dangerous direction. Politics, as I said, gives, let me look down at my notes, and I remember what I wrote to tell you it is. It's really the ability for societies to do collectively what they can't do individually, which is provide for the welfare and progress of the country. And that's why it's failing everywhere. Now, both parties in Bangladesh, as I said, are responsible for this. And that goes back, if you really want to know, to 2006, when the BNP was doing things. And then in 2011, when after the Awami League had gotten elected by a great majority, they removed the only thing that kept politics stable and more or less, I wouldn't say healthy, but more or less functional, which was the so-called caretaker amendment, which guaranteed, when done right, that there would be a free and fair election. The periods between, say, 1990 and 2011 were basically stable because each party had a chance at government every 5 years, and each party took the government every other 5 years, because while the parties were in power, governance was not their objective. Economic rent was their objective. And so when they, and there was a large middle in the, and still is in the Bangladesh public and the Bangladesh polity, I would say, that swung from one party to another. So one party hadn't governed very well, the other one was elected, then that party didn't govern very well or at all, and that the next, the other party was elected, blah, blah, blah. You see where I'm going. When I last visited Bangladesh, I'm going to get into the human rights stuff and particularly suppression of the press. What I really noticed was a climate of fear. That is because by then, this was well after Sheikh Hasina had started eliminating her opposition and eliminating anybody who questioned what she was doing in the press or in the media. And it was hard to get people to even speak to you about this. And I think that, you know, it's only gotten worse since. And that climate of fear extended to the NGOs, and to the press, to the media, where a great deal of self-censorship was going on. And as you talked about very nicely, the social media, which started with that one and then has moved to an even steeper, worse thing. And, you know, you had even sort of repression in terms of Bangladesh history. If you don't view the liberation just the right way, you're subject to repression or jailing or, you know, and you could talk, nobody has mentioned here the ICT, which was the International Court Tribunal, Tribunal, which was to try the members of the leaders of the Jamaat-e-Islami for treason during the Liberation War. And, you know, they used very, shall we say, unjudicial methods, basically were aimed at hanging all of them. And if you criticize that, you were also in trouble. As many people know, a friend of mine who's a British lawyer went out to defend a client, was not allowed after he was thrown out of the country. At least they threw him out. They didn't put him in jail. Now let me go. I'm really trying to hurry along, so this is really all history in a nutshell. I want to go to the good news, and then we can maybe we could talk about that as well as all the things that everybody has brought up here. I lived through. I witnessed the struggle for freedom and democracy in the late '80s and early '90s in Bangladesh. And I know most of the people who were involved in that. They were also, many of them, involved in the struggle for freedom from West Pakistan, or at least some respect from West Pakistan when they were part of Pakistan. And much to my surprise, these people have come out again in Bangladesh and are trying to depose the present government and trying to take the country back towards the center and towards a more democratic future. These people, I know them very well, they risked their lives in the 60s and early 70s. They've risked their lives in 1990, and most of them who are my age or even older are risking their lives again by leading the charge against the present government. They are veterans, but I know them so well that I know that what they really want is to just restore what they had fought so hard to set up in the first place, which was a Bangladesh that would move gradually but inevitably towards a democratic future in which you wouldn't see these kinds of repressions against the press and really against any opponent that turned up on the street, for example. So there is something that is run by, it started out as an alliance of small center parties, and it has grown because they have been able to hook up with the BNP. The BNP is so decimated that it really is about half the party it was. Couldn't have possibly won the election, the coming election on its own. In fact, part of the problem is that the BNP boycotted the 2014 election, which I think was the biggest mistake in Bangladesh history, if not in South Asian history, because they would have won maybe 100 seats, and they would have been able to at least put up some sort of block to what went on afterwards, because the minute that the Awami League government discovered that it had the government all to itself, the minute the Awami League discovered it had the government all to itself, let me put it that way, it went on a campaign to eliminate the opposition, the major opposition party. Very effective campaign. A number of my friends have spent time in jail. Most of them had to sign letters that they would never participate in politics before they could get out of jail. Those who didn't stayed in jail until they probably passed away. We don't know for sure sometimes. But not only friends of mine, but workers in the party down to the street level were disappeared. And I don't want to, I'm trying to keep this short, but what I'm saying is that, and I think this has global significance, because one of the things we aren't seeing in most countries is that the center is consolidating and fighting back against the authoritarians. And somehow Bangladesh has done it again. They're out front on this. Will they succeed? Well, it's it's going to be a very tough uphill fight. And I'm hoping those of you who have relatives or family in Bangladesh will convey to them the necessity for this to succeed and for them to get out and hopefully help, because it's going to be terribly difficult. One, there are a whole bunch of parties, something like 20 parties in this alliance. They all are ideologically a little different, from the left center to the right center. There are going to be the usual ideological differences that could break them up. There is also the problem of the division up of the seats that they'll run for. And there is, but the major problem, I think, the major problem will be when they have the 7 demands they've made for making a free and fair election are rejected by the government, which they basically have been. That's going to make this some of the members of this alliance more interested in perhaps going off by their own, getting chummy with the government, or just giving up. And it's going to make others think about a violent reaction, which is just about as bad as the first kind. So what I'm trying to say is this is not anywhere near a sure thing, but it needs as much help as it can. Now, I will tell you about the U.S. government. This is the only thing I know about the U.S. government. They've become a lot more firm on this particular issue. And I heard this yesterday from a couple of State Department people that they're being very, very tough. Doesn't mean we have any leverage. It doesn't mean we're ever going to get anywhere. But I think at least we're going to try to make sure that this election is as fair as it could possibly be. So anyway, I've hurried through this. You haven't heard all of my great wisdom. I'll save that for the Q&A.